thank you all for coming. My name is Mo Dhaliwal. I'm a director and co-founder of the Poetic Justice Foundation. We're gathered today at Burnaby Village Museum. They've been great partners and a great organization for us to work with. We're also gathered on the ancestral lands of the Haukamelum, the Skohomish-speaking peoples, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to be gathered here and to be on this territory today. Now, our work at the Poetic Justice Foundation is rooted in equity and justice. We recognize that systems of oppression and harm are causing genocides across the globe. We know that racism, genderism, trans hate, so many forms of oppression and violence are occurring everywhere. And all these systems that harm all of these communities are interconnected. And that's why we strongly believe in collective liberation. And that's why we're here today. It's about collective liberation. Too often we look at issues across the world and we might react to them in different ways. We might express rage and upset at the violence that we're seeing. We might be indifferent to the plight of others, right? We might wonder how we could possibly make a change or make any sort of difference at what we're witnessing. And work like what we're about to introduce today is how we can make a difference. This is how we create a change. Casteism is often regarded as an issue that was left behind in some imagined home country. Well, my home country is Canada. Right? This is my home country. And I know that casteism perpetuates, and I know casteism affects the community here. This imagined homeland isn't a faraway place, right? Because humans, wherever they travel, they take themselves with them, right? They take their culture, they take their values, they'll take their language, they'll take their way of being. So of course, everywhere where our community exists, so too does our way of being show up. And I would say the Sikh community, the Punjabi community, the South Asian community at large, has a lot to teach the world. We sit on a treasure of knowledge, of wisdom, of ways of being that could actually help the very society we live in. But so too with that, we also have some remnants, some cultural remnants of Brahmanical systems of oppression, systems of violence that we can gladly leave behind. So we have the opportunity here to take forward and share what is the best of us and leave behind these systems of oppression that have lasted for millennia and have no part in our future. So what is casteism about and how does it affect me? Why am I here, right? Well, I'm a Jat person. And historically, the Jat people are agrarian, landowning castes in the north of India. And so we're by no means high on the caste pyramid, but in our home region, in Canada, and especially in this community, we are caste privileged, right? Because we might not be high up in the pecking order of caste, but we're not at the lowest. And so what often happens is that communities that are a part of this stratified system of violence will actually oppress anybody that they perceive to be beneath them, even though they themselves might be subjected to violence, might be subjected to oppression by those that deem themselves of a higher caste. So it's something that affects us in social settings, in relationships, and friendships. Caste eliminations they're a tacit way of really putting down people of the Dalit community. And it's something that even I was guilty of, right? Some of my first interactions with a lifelong friend, this is also a confession, who was a Jamar, right? And I knew she was a Jamar, and I somehow knew that she was supposed to be lesser, even before I knew what that word meant, even before I knew what the word Jat meant. Right? So for me, as a Canadian, as somebody who was born here, how was that knowledge transmitted? How did it show up? Right? And how does it continue to be projected into the future? So why would I do that as a child? Why would we continue to do that as adults when we know that those things that we don't confront, we can't change? So caste needs to be confronted. And we know that those things that we don't resist will persist. So casteism needs to be persisted. So I want to thank you all for joining us today, and especially offering your support in this initiative and in supporting the project of Overcaste. And I'm going to invite some speakers up today, and we're going to take another tour of the exhibition and learn about the stories, learn about the team, learn about how all of this came together, and sharing the stories of casteism, how it affects the local community, and how we can show it better for ourselves. So in our first order of speakers, I want to invite up the acting Mayor of Burnaby, Danielle Tetreault, to say a few words.
Hello everyone, and thank you Mo for the kind introduction and very powerful words. And I do also want to acknowledge that we are on the Hunkaminam and Squamish-speaking people's land, and to always acknowledge and appreciate the opportunity to gather on this territory. I'd like to quickly introduce my colleagues here. We have Councillor Wang and Councillor Dollywall, and just to mention as well, to thank Councillor Dollywall for bringing very important motion to Burnaby Council earlier this year around caste discrimination, and to continue a very important work here right in Burnaby, so thank you. And I also want to, thank and acknowledge Member of Parliament Jagmeet Singh, standing behind me, and of course MP Peter Julian. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. Overcaste, as we just saw, is a powerful exhibition that tells the story of young Canadians and their struggle against caste discrimination. The content challenges us to consider the impacts of this discriminatory system and how these systems continue to affect Dalit Canadians as they build their lives in Canada. These stories are challenging, they are moving, and most importantly, they are a call to action for all of us to stand up against systemic injustices. We're extremely proud to be hosting this exhibition at the Burnaby Village Museum this spring and summer. Hosting this exhibit by Poetic Justice Foundation is an example of how the Burnaby Village Museum is working to transform itself into an institution that truly reflects the diversity of our community here in Burnaby. Sometimes that means delving into uncomfortable and difficult topics, and I applaud everyone who helped move this forward at the Burnaby Village Museum. I'm grateful for the opportunity to take this exhibition this morning to learn and to continue to push for that systemic change. Please enjoy this morning, and thank you again for the storytellers and the organizers of the Poetic Justice Foundation for helping bring this experience together. Thank you again.
All right, next I'm going to introduce someone that I think in our community requires very little introduction, but is someone who is very, I think, authentic to our purpose and who has expressed some, so many shared values with this project, and that is the MP for Burnaby South and the leader of the federal NDP, Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you very much, and I just want to begin with a huge thank you. What Anita said to me earlier was that the thing that she was most proud of, though the whole exhibit is very beautiful, was the list of the names that stood behind this project. And it means a lot, and I was thinking about what that meant. So I want to acknowledge Anita, I want to acknowledge Poetic Justice, I want to acknowledge all the folks that put their time, their energy into this project, acknowledge the Burnaby Museum for supporting, the City of Burnaby for supporting, everyone who's a part of this, because the caste system is very much rooted in shame. And to put your name boldly, to say you stand as allies in fighting the system of shame, is in itself an act of revolution, and it's a very powerful thing. And I acknowledge now, I really was sitting with the idea why Anita mentioned that the list of people that supported, why that is so important to her, because for a long time, and still, people that are oppressed based on caste stand alone. And they are the subject of a system of discrimination where those higher oppress those lower. And it really isolates and makes you feel like there's no one on your side. And so the idea of standing up and allyship is really powerful. And so thank you for being here. It really, truly means a lot. And it is an act in your presence to tear down what is a very oppressive system. So I want to acknowledge that off the top. I also just very briefly, I don't want this to be about me, but I wanted to just give an example of why this is so important and why there's so much inertia to challenge the caste system. It's something that was so methodically laid out in systems of living and community in South Asia. And so people thought, well, those systems of living, those ways of being don't exist in Canada the same way, so it's not really relevant. But what the exhibit showed is the real impact on kids to this day. If you are a child who is of a low caste, is of a Dalit, perceived as a low caste, you continue to feel excluded, oppressed, isolated, made fun of. And that is a real pain that is not something that is from another place, but it is here and manifesting in Canada. As Mo mentioned, it is something that people are experiencing here. As Anita mentioned, it's something that her family members, her loved ones, her nieces and nephews experience to this day. And that's why it's so important to fight back. And so one of the things that I try to do in not just saying that I believe in this cause, I believe in fighting the caste system, if I take a moment back, it's actually one of the express goals of the Sikh spiritual path. It is expressly written that we are supposed to work towards eradicating this system of oppression. But sadly, and maybe sometimes unknowingly, but just as painfully, people in the Sikh community are perpetuating the caste system through language and culture and songs that promote one caste, which in doing so subjugates the others. And so there is a lot of work that needs to be done. So I was known as a lawyer in my community when I first ran for politics as Jagmeet Singh Dhaliwal, and I had a firm, Dhaliwal Law. And that was the firm that people knew me by, that was the community, or that was the name I had in the community. And when I decided to run for politics, I did something that folks thought was kind of confusing. I wanted to drop my caste name. People said, well, why would you give up your branding? People have known you as this, you've got notoriety in the community. I said, I want to back up the belief that if I'm running to represent the community, I want to back up this belief by saying, I believe that we're all one. And I don't believe that I'm in any way superior or inferior based on my last name. And I want to suggest that that is the Sikh path. And so I purposely did that. And I had a lot of advice from folks to not do it. They said, it's a bad idea. You're known by a certain name. Why would you give up that in your pursuit of getting elected? I said, well, I want to do it in a way that is true to myself. So just as an ally, that's something that's very important to me, that in actions that we take will support the cause of destroying the caste system. And I feel like it's something we have to be active about. It's not something we just have to leave in the past, but we have to work to dismantle it. There's a lot of ways of thinking that exist. There's jokes that are told. And I think we've got to be really aware of that. When we hear a joke being said that discriminates or puts down someone based on caste, we have to say, hey, that's wrong. We have to be more aware of that and be calling it out wherever we can. And we have to be allies. I really love that what Mo said, just wrapping up, this idea, collective liberation. The spirit that the Sikh tradition is founded on is Ikomka, this idea that we're all one. And if we really believed in this concept of oneness, that we are all one, then we should feel the pain of our brothers and sisters and our siblings. We should feel their pain and realize if they're suffering, we're suffering. But if we take care of each other, if we lift each other up, we can all rise together. And that's the vision, I think, of how we move forward. We actively, as allies, work to dismantle all forms of oppression, because any form of oppression continues to subjugate some of us, and that means all of us are experiencing it. Thank you very much.
Next, it's my honor to introduce the co-founder of Poetic Justice Foundation and the director of the organization, and also the lead of the Overcaste project, a lifelong friend and business partner to me, an accomplice and ally in many purposes, my friend Anita Lal.
Thank you, Mo, for the introduction, and thank you, Honorable Jagmeet Singh, Deputy Mayor, sorry, I forgot your name, media and members of the community for coming out and being part of today's event. So Overcast is a project that we've been working on for about a year and a half, but it's actually decades in the making. In 1906, my great-grandfather, Mayera Memi, came to Canada and has been actually documented as being the first Dalit to come to North America. His story is similar to many of the early settlers. He came looking for a better life, a brighter future for his family, and opportunities as homeland didn't have. But for him, there was also another layer to his story. He was also looking for freedom from the centuries-old system of caste. So almost 120 years later, and 6 generations deep, we're still fighting the same system here. Even though it may look a little different, the negative and harmful effects it has on the lives and liberties of thousands of people across BC are real. Overcaste spotlights the lived experiences of Dalit Canadian youth born and raised here in Canada. It challenges the normalization of caste through our language, media, and in society. Caste discrimination is not just a few hashtags and lyrics in a song. This system has a legacy of economical, social, and spiritual exclusion and violence. In Punjab, the region of India that most of the South Asians here in BC are from, has the largest percentage of Dalits. They make up approximately 32% of the population, but only own about 3.5% of the land, according to the agriculture census of 2015-2016. So majority of the Punjabi people here in BC come from caste privilege background. So which means that with them they carry a certain social collateral, privilege, and economic power. This privilege continues to isolate and exclude people from the Dalit community here. This exhibit not only amplifies the voices of Dalit youth, who have never really actually had a platform to talk about their experiences, but it also creates opportunities for education, dialogue, and change. We invite everyone in to listen, learn, and challenge themselves by addressing the privilege and the exclusion that their privilege causes for the Dalit community. So this project for me is a labor of love, and it's rooted in a legacy of love. It was love for his future generations that brought my great-grandfather here. It was love that my Biji, my paternal grandmother, Tafi Gorlal, taught us the Sikh values of equality and social justice. And it is love that I have for my future generations through my nieces and nephews that fuel my work, for trying to create a better tomorrow for them. And I'm gonna actually share a story that happened last night with you guys. Last week, my aunt passed away, my dad's cousin, and she's someone who's really close to us. And I'm actually going to her funeral right after this event. But we were doing funeral arrangements yesterday, and I was driving my cousin home. And she was talking about how she's really proud of this event, and sorry she couldn't make it, and how it's really important. And she told me the story of a year and a half ago when we had to put my aunt into a nursing home because she had had a few strokes and she was in the early stages of dementia. They chose to put her in one in Surrey. And the reason is because the majority of the staff there was Punjabi speaking. And so she would be more comfortable, right? And they felt more comfortable with that. But, and especially because they live in Burnaby and Vancouver. So it was a bit far. But at the same time, she told me how they actually sat down as a family to discuss whether or not they should put a picture of Shri Guru Ravidas Ji on the wall in her room. Now the reason is because when the staff saw the fact that she had Guru Ravidas Ji's photo, they would associate her with being somebody who's Chamar from the Dalit background. And they were concerned that she might be treated differently, right? That she might become vulnerable. And it was hard because, my aunt would have wanted that, would have brought her comfort. And so even though this isn't a surprise to me, I was still shocked, right? So because my aunt, she came in 1959 at the age of 16. Her grandfather came in 1908. It's another family that was early settlement. My cousins were born and raised on the island, and they moved to Vancouver and Burnaby to raise their families, and even their grandchildren are born here. So this fear that they had was from their own Canadian lived experience of how society reacted to them being Dalit. And it created fear for them, for their mom, who was now vulnerable. So as I was driving home, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how I always think about future generations. I think about my nieces and nephews, and I never want them to come up against this. And the change is about tomorrow. But then I realized, no, the change is today. The change is actually for my family and for my aunt who is vulnerable even today to this discrimination. So as we move forward, and I try to change it. So as we strive to live the Canadian values of equality and inclusion, it is important to address the system of caste through our actions, our policies, and our laws. And it's important to continue together to confront, disrupt, and evolve. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. This project came together because Anita and the rest of the project team formed this beautiful village around themselves. And it was filled with highly skilled people, from designers to writers to researchers to academics to community engagement. And it was a testament to the power of shared community. And one of the key members of this team, I'm going to be introducing shortly, is Dr. Sasha Sabharwal. Sasha was one of the lead researchers on this project. She received her PhD from Yale University in 2021. She's currently an assistant professor of cultural anthropology and global Asian studies at Northeastern University in Boston. Her dissertation explored the history of Dalit communities in the Lower Mainland, specifically interviewing many members from the Guru Ravidas Gurdwara and surrounding community. So I'm going to ask Dr. Sabharwal to come up and share her thoughts.
Thank you so much, Mo, and to everyone here today. It's truly such an honor and privilege to be speaking to you all and also to be part of this team. I began my research on the history of the lived experiences of Dalit diasporic communities in the Lower Mainland in 2019. So in the past 5 years, I've witnessed the work of activists and organizers, especially those in Poetic Justice Foundation, who have worked to build transformational spaces around coalitional issues of caste, justice, and equity. As many of the folks have showed here, while it's maybe assumed that diasporic spaces produce new forms of identity and belonging, and that caste does not matter for South Asians once they leave their quote-unquote homeland, my research has found that that is not the case. As we see in many of the examples from the exhibit, caste travels and remains a central mode of differentiating within the Punjabi Sikh community. In my research, I ask, how and why do the legacies of the century-old caste system get enacted in Canada when many Punjabi communities have been away from Punjab for generations? That is, why do we continue to insist and invest in casteism? These questions of power are complicated. What does it mean to uphold caste hierarchies within white supremacist systems? To be victims of racism, and yet to also perpetuate harm against those who are of a lower caste than you? In my research, I have found that many metaphors have been used to describe and quote-unquote translate caste, allowing it to make sense for those in the diaspora. For instance, caste has been compared to race, caste has been compared to class. However, while many try to make sense of caste, the truth is that caste is a pernicious system that is nonsensical. Yet, communities still try to hold on to remnants of casteist delineation. I have found that one way that caste is asserted in the Punjabi diaspora is through the maintenance of Jat pride. This is practiced through music, social media, and within other cultural practices such as endogamy. The Jat community, who comprise the largest demographic of migrants in the diaspora, is proud of their historical contribution and community background. This is especially important in a context in which brownness has been historically racialized and read through Orientalist lenses. Of course, at times, claiming pride can be a coping mechanism in the face of white supremacy. Yet, many don't acknowledge how a casual insistence on Jat pride might be responsible for perpetuating Dalit erasure and exclusion. And as Anita has said, this is an exclusion that is both physical, symbolic, and spiritual. The work now is to understand how we might dismantle all systems of supremacy, including caste supremacy. Overcaste is the first step in this discussion and dialogue to unsettle, undo, and ultimately abolish caste. And as we know, where there is power, there is resistance. Many from the Punjabi Sikh, Dalit, Chamar, and Ravidasiya communities have fought to have their stories heard. This exhibit is one culmination of that active resistance. And when we talk about resistance, what we're really talking about is abolitionism. In a speech in 2002, Black feminist activist and scholar Angela Davis said on the work of abolition, quote, "We seek to build movements that not only end violence, but that create a society based on radical freedom, mutual accountability, and passionate reciprocity. In this society, safety and security will not be premised on violence or the threat of violence. It will be based on a collective commitment to guaranteeing the survival and care of all peoples, end quote. To move towards this vision, we must not simply be post-caste, as if it is a thing of the past, or avoid talking about caste because it makes us too uncomfortable. This is a process. We must be actively anti-caste. This is a relational act, a form of interruption and insistence. It requires us to interrogate many learned assumptions about caste hierarchies and dismantle them to move towards an anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and anti-caste future. This inaugural and unprecedented exhibit is the first step in that direction. Thank you.
In closing, I would just like to thank everybody that joined us this morning, everybody that came out from the media, all of our elected officials that support this work. And in the coming weeks, months, perhaps even in the next year, my hope would be that you start seeing more awareness, more communication around caste as an issue. But especially that you start seeing very specific initiatives start to take hold. Right? This could be everything from introducing protections around caste oppression within policy at municipal and provincial level. We know that the city of Seattle, just to the south of us, was quite pioneering in this effort, where they actually recognized caste as a protected category at city council. And so these are initiatives that are starting to show life and starting to sort of mushroom around the country as people are becoming more aware. And frankly speaking, this is an easy win for us. If there's a caste initiative, if there's an anti-caste motion, some policy being introduced, for our elected officials, for our community members, and especially in this community, this should be a very easy win for us, right? There is literally no case to be made for not supporting any sort of anti-caste initiative that comes up in the coming weeks and months. So my hope and my request for everybody here today would be that as you start seeing more awareness around casteism, as you see some of these initiatives take hold, please share them, please talk about them, and please support them.